Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. We're reading the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada's magnum opus, which is a history of the universe based on the periodic appearance of Krishna's incarnations and in different lines of saintly kings coming from the sun. And in this way we're getting a scientific worldview and basis for understanding how the universe unfolds and what the laws of nature are and how they are being conducted by Krishna and in his various incarnations and expansions, and how he comes into the universe periodically in order to adjust things and sort things out completely without mistake, and the lessons to be learned and how we can actually live our individual lives completely in harmony with God's laws and at least preserve the truth, so that when the Kali Yuga gets worse, and it is going to get worse, it is getting worse in front of our very eyes, and people have had enough. All over the world people are having enough. There's people writing things and expressing things. They've had enough of these so-called leaders who are leading us into oblivion. And I was just listening to Prabhupada this morning. He was in New Vrindavan, and the devotees, it was kind of an intimate garden type of conversation. And Srila Prabhupada was explaining how people are going to come to us eventually. We've got all these books out there, and it may not seem like it, but they're out there, and people are reading them, and sometimes it takes them a long time to get to them. Maybe a child or a grandchild or even a great-grandchild might pull it off the dust off and read it and say, and come to us and say, hey, what does this mean? So we're here learning these books so that we'll be able to explain to people what the truth is and what it means, what it all means. So Krishna is now explaining to Uddhava what it means and what he wants, what his will is, just before he leaves. Mahabharata ends, Krishna leaves, and then the Bhagavatam appears, and then it continues. The shelter that Krishna was giving is transferred to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Not like any other scripture, any other history book, any other literature. It's actually the answers that we all need to stay fresh and stay happy and stay enthusiastic when everything around us is in chaos. That's the test. Okay, Sanatana Goswami was trying to get the ball rolling, keep the ball rolling. Lord Chaitanya instructed him 3 months straight, and he wrote this beautiful glorification of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastabdipi Yusha, Sarva Vilanka Satpada, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad-Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidwandoditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad-Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Padaya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who were supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Mat Sangin Mad Guru Mad Mahadana Mad Nishtadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostude. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhuta dayin atinit chochata kada hanamuncha kada jinmam premna rit kantayospudan. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Uddhava found Krishna alone and begged him to take him with him because he's so deeply in love with Krishna that he's one with Krishna in agreement with everything, and he is with tears in his eyes begging Krishna not to go without him because he knows he's going to go. And Krishna's beginning the instructions to Uddhava. Text 9, chapter 7, text 11, Srimad-Bhagavatam. Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Therefore, bringing all your senses under control and thus subduing the mind, you should see the entire world as situated within the self, who is expanded everywhere. And you should also see this individual self within me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The word vititam, or widely expanded, implies that the individual jiva soul is present throughout the material universe. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita 2.24, Lord Krishna states, Nityat Sarvagata. In Bhagavad Gita 2.24, Lord Krishna states, the individual, Nitya Sarvagata, the individual soul, Hare Krishna, the individual soul is eternal and is expanded everywhere throughout the material and spiritual worlds. This does not mean, however, that each individual soul is all-pervading, but that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has expanded his marginal potency everywhere. Thus, one should not blindly conclude that a minute living entity is all-pervading. Rather, one should understand that God is great and expands his personal energy everywhere. In this verse, Atmanik Shashva Vitatam means that this material world is created to facilitate the sense gratification of the conditioned souls who were trying to enjoy without Krishna their actual master. The living entities are busily trying to exploit the external energy of the Lord, but their jurisdiction over the material world is illusory. Both the material nature and the conditioned living being are energies of the Lord, and thus exist within the personality of Godhead and are under his supreme control. The individual living entity exists for the pleasure of the personality of Godhead and is the Lord's eternal servant. As soon as the senses become absorbed in material gratification, they lose their power to experience the absolute truth. The actual goal of sense activity is satisfaction of Vishnu, the Lord, and all of the senses can experience infinite spiritual pleasure by perceiving and serving the Lord in His personal feature. Those who adopt the impersonal conception of God, however, try to stop all sense activity. But because the senses cannot remain permanently inactive, they naturally return to activities in the realm of material illusion. If one engages the senses in the service of the personality of Godhead, then one enjoys unlimited pleasure upon seeing the transcendental beauty of the Lord's form. But unless one qualifies himself by pure loving devotion to Krishna, the Lord does not award him this exalted experience. Therefore, every conditioned soul should end his unnecessary separation from the personality of Godhead by rejoining the Lord's blissful company. Lord Krishna personally comes down to reopen the blind eyes of the conditioned souls, and thus the Lord is personally teaching Uddhava, so that sincere souls in the future might take advantage of his instructions. Indeed, hundreds of millions of people, even now, derive spiritual enlightenment from Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Text 10. Being fully endowed with conclusive knowledge of the Vedas, and having realized the ultimate purpose of such knowledge in practice, you will be able to perceive the pure self, and thus your mind will be satisfied. At that time you will be dear to all living beings, headed by the demigods, and you will never be hampered by any disturbance in life. Purport. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, one whose mind is free from material desire becomes disinterested in demigod worship, since the purpose of such worship is material amelioration. The demigods, however, are never displeased with one who becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna and offers all of his worship to the Lord. The demigods themselves are humble servants of Lord Krishna, as was amply demonstrated in Lord Krishna's pastimes on the earth. One who can experience the eternal soul within everyone's body certainly becomes dear to all living entities. Since he sees everyone as qualitatively equal to himself, he does not envy anyone or try to lord it over any other living being. Being free from envy and a well-wisher of all, such a self-realized soul is naturally dear to everyone. As stated in the song to the 6 Goswamis, Dira, Dira Jana Priyo, Priyakaro, Nirmatsarao, Pujito. Text 11. One who has transcended material good and evil automatically acts in accordance with religious injunctions and avoids forbidden activities. The self-realized person does this spontaneously, like an innocent child, and not because he is thinking in terms of material good and evil. Purport. One who has developed transcendental knowledge never acts whimsically. Srila Rupa Goswami describes the progression of devotional service from sadhana bhakti to prema bhakti. Prema bhakti is the stage of spontaneous love of Godhead, whereas sadhana bhakti means the conscientious practice of the regulative principles of devotional service. In most cases, one who is now enjoying transcendental consciousness has rigidly practiced the rules and regulations of devotional service. Thus, due to previous practice, one spontaneously avoids sinful activity and acts in accordance with the standards of ordinary piety. This does not mean that a self-realized soul is consciously avoiding sin and pursuing piety. Rather, due to his self-realized nature, he spontaneously engages in the most exalted spiritual activities, just as an innocent child may spontaneously exhibit good qualities such as kindness, tolerance, and so on. The spiritual platform is called Shuddha Sattva, or purified goodness, to distinguish it from the material mode of goodness, which is always to some extent polluted by the lower modes of passion and ignorance. Thus, if a man in material goodness appears to be most pious in the eyes of the world, we can only imagine the spotless character of a self-realized soul in purified spiritual goodness. Therefore it is stated in Srimad-Bhagavatam 5.18.12, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavat yakinchana sarvair gunais tatra samasate sudaha hadalva bhaktasya karo kuto mahad guna mano retena satidavato bahi. If one is a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, he will automatically exhibit all the exalted qualities of the demigods. Such manifestation of purity is spontaneous, as explained in this verse. Text 12. One who is the kind well-wisher of all living beings, who is peaceful and firmly fixed in knowledge and realization, sees me within all things. Such a person never again falls down into the cycle of birth and death. Text 13. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, O King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, thus instructed his pure devotee Uddhava, who was eager to receive knowledge from the Lord. Uddhava then offered obeisances to the Lord and spoke as follows. Purport. Uddhava is described here as Tatvam Jigyasu, or desiring to know the truth. It is clear from previous verses that Sri Uddhava is a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, and that he considers devotional service to Lord Krishna to be the perfection of life. Thus the words Tatvam Jigyasu indicate that since Lord Krishna is about to leave the earth, Uddhava is most anxious to deepen his understanding of the Lord, so that he may further advance in loving service at the Lord's lotus feet. Unlike an ordinary philosopher or scholar, a pure devotee is not eager to acquire knowledge for personal gratification. Text 14. Shri Uddhava said, My dear Lord, you alone award the results of yoga practice, and you are so kind that by your influence you distribute the perfection of yoga to your devotee. Thus you are the Supreme Soul who is realized through yoga, and it is you who are the origin of all mystic power. For my supreme benefit, you have explained the procedure for giving up the material world through the process of sannyas, or renunciation. Purport. The word yogesha here indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead awards the results of all yoga practices. Since all of the material and spiritual worlds emanate from the transcendental body of Krishna, there is nothing to be achieved by any yoga process except Krishna and his potencies. And since the Lord remains eternally the master of his potencies, no one can achieve anything through yoga or any other spiritual or material process except by the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word yoga means linking up, and unless we link ourselves with the Absolute Truth, we remain covered by the darkness of ignorance. Thus, Krishna is the goal of yoga. In the material world, we falsely try to link ourselves with the objects of the senses. Man wants to link with woman, and woman with man. Or one tries to link up with nationalism, socialism, capitalism, or innumerable other creations of the illusory energy of the Lord. Since we are linking ourselves to temporary objects, the relationships are temporary, the results are temporary, and at the time of death, we become bewildered when all of our connections are suddenly cut off by Maya. If we link ourselves to Krishna, however, our relationship with him will continue even after death. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, the relationship with Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, The relationship with Krishna that we develop in this life will continue to increase in our next life until we achieve the supreme goal of entering Krishna's planet. Those who sincerely serve the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, following the transcendental lifestyle prescribed by the Lord, will enter the Lord's abode at the end of this lifetime. One can never achieve a permanent situation by material speculation, and what to speak of by ordinary material sense gratification. By the methods of Hatha Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, etc., one does not actually awaken his propensity for rendering eternal loving service to the personality of Godhead. Thus one is bereft of the transcendental tastes of spiritual enjoyment. Sometimes the conditioned soul, disgusted by his failure to gratify his senses, bitterly decides to renounce the material world and merge into the impersonal, painless transcendence. But our actual happy situation is to render loving service at the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. All of the different yoga processes gradually lead one to love of Godhead, and it is Lord Krishna's aim to re-establish the conditioned souls in this happy position. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making this perfection easily available to the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, the supreme yoga process for this age. Text 15. My dear Lord, O Supreme Soul, for those whose minds are attached to sense gratification, and especially for those bereft of devotion unto you, such renunciation of material enjoyment is most difficult to perform. That is my opinion. Purport. Those who are truly devoted to the Supreme Lord do not accept anything for their personal gratification, but rather accept those things suitable to be offered in the Lord's loving service. The word vishayatmabhi indicates those who desire material objects for their personal gratification instead of for the devotional service of the Lord. The minds of such materialistic persons are suitably disturbed, and it is virtually impossible for such persons to renounce material enjoyment. This is the opinion of Sri Uddhava. Text 16. O my Lord, I myself am most foolish, because my consciousness is merged in the material body and bodily relations, which are all manufactured by your illusory energy. Thus I am thinking, I am this body, and all of these relatives are mine. Therefore, my Lord, please instruct your poor servant. Please tell me how I can very easily carry out your instructions. Purport. It is very difficult to give up false identification with the material body.
I'm listening.
Whoa, spreading. Even Siri wants to hear. Even Siri wants to hear this. It is very difficult to give up false identification with the material body, and thus we remain attached to our so-called bodily relations, such as wife, children, friends, and so on. Bodily attachment causes intense pain within the heart, and we are stunned by lamentation and hankering. Sri Uddhava, a pure devotee of the Lord, here speaks like an ordinary person, showing how to pray to the personality of Godhead. We practically see that many sinful persons enter the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and after preliminary purification, become most repentant for their previous illicit activities. They are shocked when they realize how they gave up the personal association of God to pursue the useless forms created by Maya. Therefore, they wholeheartedly pray to the spiritual master and Lord Krishna to be engaged eternally in transcendental devotional service. Such a repentant, eager mentality is most auspicious for spiritual advancement. The Lord certainly answers the prayers of a repentant devotee, desperate to escape the clutches of illusion. Text 17. My dear Lord, you are the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you reveal yourself to your devotees. Besides your Lordship, I do not see anyone who can actually explain perfect knowledge to me. Such a perfect teacher is not to be found even among the demigods in heaven. Indeed, all of the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, are bewildered by your illusory potency. They are conditioned souls who accept their own material bodies and bodily expansions to be the highest truth. Purport. All conditioned souls, from Brahma down to the insignificant ant, are declared by Sri Uddhava to be covered by material bodies produced by the illusory potency of the Lord. The demigods in heaven, being absorbed in universal management, constantly utilize their fabulous material potencies. They therefore gradually fix their minds upon their mystically empowered bodies, and also upon their bodily expansions, such as their celestial wives, children, co-workers, and friends. In the course of life in the heavenly planets, the demigods become conditioned to think in terms of material good and bad, and thus they accept the immediate welfare of their bodies to be the highest goal of life. The demigods do, however, try to strictly follow the laws of God, and to help them do this, the Supreme Lord descends to remind the heavenly beings of his own Supreme Personality, which possesses powers infinitely exceeding theirs. Lord Vishnu has an eternal body, full of bliss, knowledge, and unlimited variegated potencies, whereas the demigods possess only deluxe material forms. Deluxe. A-grade prisoners, subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. Because the demigods are attached to ruling the created universe, their devotion to God is tinged with material desires. They are therefore attracted to those portions of Vedic knowledge that award the various material opulences necessary for perpetuating their celestial life. Sri Uddhava, however, being a pure devotee of the Lord, is determined to go back home, back to Godhead, for eternal life, and is thus not at all interested in the sophisticated Vedic knowledge of the demigods. The material world is a gigantic prison whose inmates are subjected to birth, death, old age, and disease, and a pure devotee has no desire to remain there, even as a first-class prisoner, like the demigods. Sri Uddhava desires to return to the kingdom of God, and for this reason directly approaches the personality of Godhead. The Lord is Swadrisha, or one who reveals himself to his devotee. Thus, only the Lord himself or his pure devotee, who faithfully repeats the Lord's message, can take one beyond the material sky, into the free atmosphere of the spiritual planets, where the liberated souls enjoy an eternal life of bliss and omniscience. Text 18. Therefore, O Lord, feeling weary of material life and tormented by its distresses, I now surrender unto you, because you are the perfect Master. You are the unlimited, unknowing, Supreme Personality of all-knowing, Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose spiritual abode in Vaikuntha is free from all disturbances. In fact, you are known as Narayana, the true friend of all living beings. Purport. No one can claim to be a self-made man. Shall I repeat that? You don't mind? No one can claim to be a self-made man, because everyone works with the body and mind awarded by material nature. By the laws of nature, there is always anxiety in material existence, and terrible tragedies periodically harass the conditioned souls. Here Uddhava points out that only Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is a proper master, friend, and shelter for the conditioned souls. We may be attracted by the good qualities of a particular man or demigod, but we may later discover discrepancies in that person's behavior. Therefore Krishna is described as anavadyam. There are no discrepancies in the personal conduct or character of the personality of Godhead. He is eternally faultless. We may faithfully serve a master, father, or demigod, but when it is time for us to receive our reward for faithful service, the master may die. Therefore, Lord Krishna is here described as Anantaparam. For Lord Krishna is here described as Anantaparam, which indicates that he is not limited by time or space. The word anta indicates the termination of time, and para indicates a spatial termination. Therefore, Anantaparam means that Lord Krishna is not limited by time or space, and thus will always dutifully reward his faithful servants. If we serve someone other than the personality of Godhead, our so-called master may forget our service or become ungrateful. Therefore, Lord Krishna is described here as Sarvajñam, omniscient. He can never forget the service of his devotee, and therefore he is never ungrateful. In fact, it is said that Lord Krishna does not remember the faults of his devotees, but only the sincere service they have rendered. A further disadvantage in serving anyone besides Krishna is that when we are in danger, our master may not be able to protect us. If we take shelter of our nation, that nation may be destroyed in war. If we take shelter of our family, they also may die. And as described in the Vedic literature, even the demigods are sometimes defeated by the demons. But since Lord Krishna is described here as Ishvara, or the Supreme Controller, there is no danger of his being overcome or even impeded by any other power. Thus Lord Krishna's promise of protection to his devotee is eternally valid. If we do not serve the personality of Godhead, we will not know the ultimate result of our service. But here Lord Krishna is described as Akunta Vikunta Dishnyam. Lord Krishna has an eternal abode called Vaikunta, and that abode is never disturbed by anything. The faithful servants of Lord Krishna will certainly go back to Godhead, back home, for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge in the personal abode of the Lord. However, since even the demigods, and what to speak of insignificant human beings, are subject sooner or later to annihilation, what ultimate benefit can be derived from serving them? Uddhava describes his personal situation as Nirvinadi and Vrijina Vitapta. In other words, Sri Uddhava states that he is exhausted and discouraged by the contradictions and anguish of material life. He has been forced, therefore, to become humble and surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna, the personal friend of every living entity. In the material world, a great man does not have time for insignificant men. But although the Lord is the greatest person, he sits in the heart of every living entity. Thus he is the most merciful. Lord Krishna is the ultimate shelter of even Nara, or the Lord's Purusha expansion, who creates the material world. The living entity is called Nara, and the source of his material situation is Nara, or Mahavishnu. The word Narayana indicates that even Mahavishnu finds his shelter in Krishna, who is certainly supreme. Although our consciousness is presently contaminated by sinful propensities, if we follow the example of Sri Uddhava and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, everything can be rectified. Taking shelter of Krishna means taking shelter of devotional service to Krishna and obeying Him. Lord Krishna demands this in the Bhagavad Gita, and if we comply with the order of the Lord, our life can become fully auspicious and successful. Sooner than we expect, we may, by Krishna's mercy, enter the kingdom of God for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Something's ringing through my mind. Can I say it? It's okay. You know, when I first got a hold of these books, you remember I told you the story when I was in the mountain, I got these two books, and all of a sudden I realized they were from the same author. And the thing that struck me about these books was that the author never pointed to himself. Never, not one. There was not even one syllable, one hint of him pointing to himself. Whereas everyone else I had read and all I've heard about it, they were always pointing to themselves. You follow me, then you can go to Krishna, or they are Krishna, you know. So the spiritual master, he never points to himself. He always points the disciple to Krishna. Even though the disciple is supposed to go to Krishna through the spiritual master. The spiritual master never thinks like that. He always tries to point the disciple to Krishna by filling his heart and ears with sounds, taking one to Krishna. Anyway, that just came out of my heart. Hare Krishna. Text 19. The Supreme Lord replied, generally, those human beings who can expertly analyze the actual situation of the material world are able to raise themselves beyond the inauspicious life of gross material gratification. Purport. Sri Uddhava expressed to the Lord in the previous verses his fallen condition and his entanglement in the material concept of life. Now Lord Krishna reassures Uddhava that even persons far less qualified than Uddhava are able to extricate themselves from the inauspicious life of material sense gratification. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, even if one has not received the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one can understand by direct and indirect analysis that the material world is not a place of enjoyment. Direct analysis means one's personal experience, and indirect analysis means hearing and reading of the experience of others. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Krishna considered Uddhava to be more intelligent than even the demigods in heaven. Uddhava, however, was feeling discouraged, thinking himself unqualified to render devotional service to the Lord. But Uddhava was actually perfectly situated because he had achieved Lord Krishna as his personal spiritual master. Similarly, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement are guided by the instructions of the Society's founder Acharya, Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Paribrajaka Ashottarasata Sri Srimad, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Therefore, a sincere member of the Krishna consciousness movement should never feel discouraged, but should rather count his blessings and do the needful to go back home, back to Godhead. Within the material world, certain activities are auspicious and produce happiness, whereas other activities, being sinful, are inauspicious and unlimited suffering. Even one who has not yet received the complete mercy of the bona fide Krishna conscious spiritual master should conclude by sharp intelligence that there is no happiness in ordinary material life, and that real self-interest lies beyond the material platform. Srila Madhvacharya points out that even if one is expert not only in material knowledge, but also in spiritual knowledge, one will enter into the darkness of ignorance if one neglects the association of the devotees of the Lord. Therefore, one should not misinterpret this verse in any way that minimizes the significance of the pure devotee, spiritual master. One who is vichakshana, or expert, will eventually come to understand the difference between matter and spirit. Such a person will certainly recognize and appreciate a genuine spiritual master. One who is advanced in knowledge undoubtedly becomes humble, and thus an expert, advanced human will never neglect the lotus feet of the pure devotees of the Lord. Text 20. An intelligent person, expert in perceiving the world around him and in applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Thus, sometimes one acts as one's own instructing spiritual master. Shall I read that again? I mean, this is about as good as it gets. An intelligent person, expert in perceiving the world around him and applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Thus, sometimes one acts as one's own instructing spiritual master. Purport. As illustrated in this chapter by the conversation between King Yadu and the Avaduta, a sensitive, reasonable person can acquire real knowledge and happiness simply by carefully observing the world around him. By observing the happiness and distress of other living entities, one can understand what is beneficial and what is destructive. Srila Jiva Goswami states in this connection, Guruvanusarane Pravartaka Ityartha. The knowledge acquired by one's own perception and intelligence leads one to appreciate the value of the representative of Lord Krishna. The word Shreyas in this verse indicates that one can advance in life through one's own intelligence. By good association, one should gradually come to understand one's eternal position as servant of Krishna, and then one becomes very eager to live in the company of other enlightened persons. Birds of a feather flock together. The symptom of an enlightened servant of Krishna is that he is eager for the company of other such great souls. Thus, by one's sensitive and rational observation of this material world, one should come to appreciate the value of spiritual life and in the association of the devotees. 21. In the human form of life, those who are self-controlled and expert in the spiritual science of Sankhya can directly see me along with all of my potencies. Purport. We find the following statement in the Vedas. I'll skip the Sanskrit, it's too long. In the human form of life, the soul is fully endowed with intelligence to understand spiritual knowledge. Thus, in human life, the soul may speak realized knowledge, see the truth, know the truth, know the future, and also understand the reality both of this world and of the next. Taking advantage of the experience of mortal life, the soul in human form may endeavor for immortality, and the human body is fully equipped to achieve this end. In such an elevated state, the soul is certainly well acquainted with the ordinary activities of animals, such as eating and drinking. The human form of life, Purushatva, is very significant because it affords us the opportunity to perfect our existence. The Sankhya system mentioned here is best illustrated by the instructions of Lord Kapila to his mother, Devahuti. Lord Kapila is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his mother approached him saying, Nirvina nitaram bhuman asad indriya tarshanat yena sambhavyamanena prapanandam tamak prabho. I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Bhagavatam 3:25-7. Lord Kapila delivered to his mother a highly analytical summary of all material and spiritual reality. It is significant that Lord Kapila did not discriminate against his mother because she was a woman, nor did he consider her incapable of understanding the most elaborate spiritual knowledge. Thus, in a Krishna-conscious society of liberated souls, any man, woman, or child may become a great devotee of Lord Krishna without discrimination. It is also significant that in the highly intellectual Sankhya system enunciated by Lord Kapila, the solid conclusion is surrender to the lotus feet of the pure devotees and love of Godhead. In Lord Kapila's instructions, in the third canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, he emphasizes the need to take shelter of the pure devotees of the Lord. In the present verse, Lord Krishna says, Sankhya Yoga Visharadaha, those who are expert in taking shelter of the pure devotees and who can thus understand the actual situation of this world are able to see Krishna in his personal form, along with his internal and external potencies. A spiritual master becomes bona fide by his full surrender to his spiritual master. But it's explained in this chapter, one may also act as his own guru. This means that an intelligent and perceptive person can understand the nature of this world and his own limitations. Such a person then becomes very much inclined to associate with the pure devotees of the Lord and to receive the mercy of those who are advanced in Krishna consciousness. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, Sankhya Yoga, as described here, refers to the rigorous intellectual progress of the Jnana Yoga system, along with the devotion of Bhakti Yoga, which emphasizes the mercy of the lotus feet of the pure devotees. Actually, Jnana Yoga is a factor in the Bhakti Yoga system. Since Krishna is Jnanagamya, or the goal of all knowledge, the Lord also says in the Bhagavad Gita 10:10 that he personally enlightens a sincere devotee with all knowledge. In this chapter, Lord Krishna is training Uddhava to see the Lord's personal form in the course of his daily experiences in the material world. The Lord has already indicated to Uddhava that he will travel throughout the world in samadhi or trance. And now Lord Krishna is preparing Uddhava to travel as a true sannyasi, seeing the personality of Godhead everywhere. Hare Krishna. What a purport. Text 22. In this world, there are many kinds of created bodies, some with one leg, others with 2, 3, 4, or more legs. And since others with no legs, and still others with no legs, but all of these, the human form, of all of these, the human form is actually dear to me. Purport. The ultimate purpose of material creation is to facilitate the return of the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Since this redemption of the conditioned souls is especially possible in the human form of life, naturally, this form is particularly dear to the compassionate personality of Godhead. Text 23. Although I, the Supreme Lord, can never be captured by ordinary sense perception, those situated in human life may use their intelligence and other facilities of perception to directly search for me through both apparent and indirectly ascertained symptoms. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, the word yukta in this verse indicates those engaged in the regulated practice of Bhakti Yoga. The devotees of the Lord do not abandon their intelligence and become mindless fanatics, as some fools think. As indicated by the words anumanata and gunayat linga, Gunar Lingai. A devotee engaged in bhakti yoga intensely searches out the personality of Godhead through all of the rational faculties of the human brain. The word mrigayanti, or searching, does not, however, indicate an unregulated or unauthorized process. If we are searching for the telephone number of a particular person, we look in the authorized telephone directory. Similarly, if we are searching for a particular product, we go to a specialized store where we are likely to find what we are looking for. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not a product of the imagination, and thus we cannot whimsically imagine what the Lord might be. Therefore, to gain information about Lord Krishna, we must conduct a regulated search in the authorized Vedic scriptures. The word agrayam in this verse indicates that no one can achieve or understand Lord Krishna by ordinary speculation or through the activities of the material senses. In this regard, Srila Rupa Goswami states the following verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2, 234. Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grayam Indriyahi Sevan Mukhe Hijivado Swayam Eva Spurdatyadaha. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. The words Griyamanayar Gunai indicate the rational and intellectual faculties of the human brain. All of these can be used to directly and indirectly perceive the personality of Godhead. Indirectly, one may experience the Lord through his creation. Since we are experiencing this world through our intelligence and senses, we may conclude that our own intelligence must have a creator, and that creator is therefore supremely intelligent. Thus, through simple logic, any sane person can understand that there is a supreme personality of Godhead who is controlling everything. One may directly perceive the Lord through chanting and hearing his holy names and glories. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu means that one should always chant and hear of the glories of the Lord. One who perfectly hears and chants will undoubtedly see the Lord face to face. Lord Krishna is all-pervading, and one should search for him everywhere. By the transcendental senses, purified by bhakti yoga, one may directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as indicated by the word ada in this verse. The perception is direct and not imaginary. This point has been elaborately explained by Srila Prabhupada in his purport to this verse from Srimad-Bhagavatam 2.2.35. Bhagavan sarva bhuteshu lakshitat swatmana harihi drishayar buddhyadibir drashta lakshanar anumapakahi. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Text 24. In this regard, sages cite historical narration concerning the conversation between the greatly powerful King Yadu and an Avaduta. Purport. Lord Krishna will narrate this story to show Uddhava how rational intelligence can be utilized in bhakti yoga to acquire Vedic knowledge, and how ultimately an intelligent person will come to the lotus feet. of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 25. Maharaj Yadu once observed a certain Brahmana Avaduta, who appeared to be quite young and learned, wandering about fearlessly. Being himself most learned in spiritual science, the king took the opportunity and inquired from him as follows. Text 26. Shri Yadu said, "O Brahmana, I see that you are not engaged in any practical religious activity, and yet you have acquired a most expert understanding of all things and all people within this world. Kindly tell me, sir, how did you acquire this extraordinary intelligence? And why are you traveling freely throughout the world, behaving as if you were a child?" Takes one to know one. Just by looking, you can tell that this was the situation. 27. Generally, human beings work hard to cultivate religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and also knowledge of the soul. And their usual motive is to increase the duration of their lives, acquire fame, and enjoy material opulence. Purport. An intelligent person should understand that if there is an eternal soul different from the body, then real happiness must lie in our eternal situation, beyond the bondage of material nature. However, ordinary persons, even when discussing spiritual subject matters, generally desire to become famous or to increase their wealth and duration of life by such spiritual practices. Most common people think, for example, that the yoga system is meant for improving one's health, that one may pray to God for money, and that one's spiritual knowledge is meant for increasing one's prestige in society. Maharaj Yadu wants to clarify that the young Brahmana, Avaduta, is not like ordinary persons who think that he is actually on the spiritual platform, as will be explained in the following verses. 28. This is hard to stop. Huh? I mean, this is hard, really hard to stop. I don't know how I'm going to find a stopping place. It's Krishna speaking to us. Okay. 28. You, however, although capable, learned, expert, handsome, and most eloquent, are not engaged in doing anything, nor do you desire anything. Rather, you appear stupefied and maddened as if you were a ghostly creature. Purport. Ignorant persons often think that renounced spiritual life is meant for those who are impotent or homely or incompetent in practical worldly affairs. Sometimes foolish people say that religious life is a crutch for those who are not expert enough to achieve a high status in society. Therefore, King Yadu has described the qualities of the mendicant Brahmana in order to show that the Brahmana has taken to renounce spiritual life in spite of great potential for worldly success. The Avaduta Brahmana is described as being expert, learned, good-looking, eloquent, and in every sense qualified to be a great material success. Reminds me of Vaisheshika Prabhu. Still, the Avaduta has renounced material life and taken to Krishna consciousness. Going back home, back to Godhead for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge is the real work of a human being. The followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu simultaneously cultivate their own Krishna consciousness and strenuously endeavor in missionary work to help others become Krishna conscious. Often foolish persons deride the devotees, saying, "Why don't you get a job?" When you go out, because you don't hear it so much when you're going out and doing the college campuses. Well, we did the airports in the 70s, in the early 70s. Oh man, I used to hear this a lot, But then sometimes these experts, materialists, they would sit there and watch us, and they would see books going out, people we had never met before, taking a book, giving a 5 or a 10 or a 20 and sometimes more. And they would like follow us around and they'd tap us on the shoulder. Hey, if you come over to us and sell our things, we'll give you so much this, that, the other. Yeah, it happened regularly. It happened regularly. Why don't you get a job with us? Why don't you get a job with us? They think that someone who is sincerely endeavoring for spiritual enlightenment and one who is enlightening others is not doing anything practical. When it says that sometimes your own intelligence can become your spiritual master, this is what it means. Because when your mind starts telling you these things, or somebody else starts telling you these things, and you don't have your guru around, or there's not a close devotee that you know and trust around, you have to do the job. That's the issue. Why don't you get a job? They think that one who is sincerely endeavoring for spiritual enlightenment and who is also enlightening others is not doing anything practical. Foolish materialists will pay millions of dollars to extend their lives by a few weeks or months in a hospital, but they do not appreciate someone endeavoring for eternal life. There is no actual logic in material life. The act of trying to enjoy without Krishna is in itself the culmination of irrationality, and thus we cannot expect to find anything ultimately rational or logical in materialistic life devoid of Krishna consciousness. Many devotees of Krishna come from wealthy, learned, and influential families, and they take to Krishna consciousness in order to perfect their lives. It's certainly not due to a lack of opportunity for material advancement. Although sometimes persons in material distress approach the Supreme Lord for help in material life, a real devotee of Lord Krishna voluntarily gives up all types of material enjoyment, knowing that nothing but love of Krishna and service to his lotus feet are the actual perfection of life. That's it for tonight. I mean, I can't, it's very hard to stop, but I have to stop. 7:13 already. Okay, Hare Krishna. Time for our open mic spot. I'm sure there was a few points that struck a few nerves around here. It did with me anyway. Yes, Prana, go ahead. Hold your thought, Bhakti-Duck. Don't lose it. We want to hear from you next.
Well, I don't know. I like the whole thing. I mean, I saved some notes.
I think I think we are all in agreement about that one.
I'm gonna come back to me because I'm still trying to have a reflection on the tip of my tongue. But
Okay, Bhakti-Duck, you got the floor.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Bhakti-Duck.
I just wanted to ask a question on this one verse. It was giving a purport of Srila Prabhupada. He says in a verse from Srimad-Bhagavatam that the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being, along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because
Well, there's a purport up to that verse, which explains it more thoroughly than I can.
Okay.
I will try to remember some of it, as much as I can with my imperfect intelligence. The human intelligence has the capacity to sit down and think, does he exist or not? Difference between the human intelligence and the animal intelligence, the animal brain. Read it again.
The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence.
The human being has the capacity to perceive for himself that he is conscious, that he is a conscious person, that he's there, that he exists. And once he comes to that platform of human life, then he starts to inquire. And the first thing he notices is that there's things going on inside his body that are going on without his control. This is meditation. This is what it means. Why? Read it again.
Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being, along with the individual soul, and this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence.
Okay, so we're sitting here, and we've just perceived that we exist. And yet, we can also perceive through using the intelligence. And this intelligence, eventually, if you get to the end of this process, you can see for yourself that there's a supreme intelligence, there's an intelligence beyond you who must be doing these things. Because you're not. And yet it's going on systematically. So all the things are going on inside your body and you're not controlling anything. So that means that there's something beyond your control doing it. Then you perceive that you're not your body by your own intelligence. Then you look out at the world through that understanding. And you see, wow, there's other things going on out there. Trees are blowing in the breeze, and people are walking around and running around and going here and doing this, and they seem to be doing the same thing, but you don't have any control over any of it. This is what it means to use your intelligence, your human intelligence. And by using your human intelligence like that, you must conclude that there is an intelligence beyond you that is controlling what's going on inside your body and going on outside in other bodies and in all the energy around you. And then you come to the point. There must be a supreme intelligence. There is a super soul. And that super soul must be residing in you. Otherwise all these things couldn't be going on because you had nothing to do with it. But somebody's doing it. The material science, I wish Jair was here. He'll just be jumping up and down right now. Yeah, I want to say something about physics. I know how these guys are thinking, and they're an illusion. Let me explain it to you. I'm waiting for him to come and start doing that every night.
Okay.
So go to that Bhagavatam,
2:35.
2:35. And you read the purport, and you'll see that I may not have gotten everything right, but the general gist of it, the end and the beginning are the same, right? Correct.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Gurudev. I just wanted to say that what Doug just brought, what Bhakti Doug just brought up was it made my heart kind of start with your response to it. Made my heart kind of beat a little heavier, and I had like a feeling of gratitude come over, because knowing that the Lord is controlling all of this and we have no control over it, it's like makes me grateful, because I wouldn't even want to have to try and handle what's going on around everywhere, and the Lord is taking care of it for us. We just have to surrender to it.
No. Now, when Arjuna surrendered to Krishna, and when you actually surrender to Krishna, as we just heard, purport after purport after purport, you have to surrender and do the work. Not that you let Krishna do the work. Krishna is not going to surrender for you. You have to surrender. It means you have to seek out the association of your spiritual master and other pure devotees, and bring other people to the association of Krishna and the pure devotees of Krishna. And not think that the Lord is doing everything and He'll do it for me. Krishna never said that to Arjuna. Okay, Arjuna, just surrender to me, and you just sit here in the chariot, and just sit there and don't do anything. I'll do everything. I'll watch this. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmarayudyacha. Maya pritimano buddhir mami bhashyacha samshaya. You have to do what you do, but you have to do it remembering Krishna at the same time. Not just that you remember Krishna and let everybody do everything for you. And then that's spiritual life. And material life is that I go out and work like an ass, and no, you still work hard. Still work hard, but you remember Krishna while you're doing it, and you feel that gratitude while you're doing what you're doing for Krishna. Not that Krishna's doing. One time I was in San Francisco, and there was like a stairway like this, and Prabhupada's room was up here, and he came down. I can't remember what it was. He was coming down to the temple room, and the way the thing was situated, he didn't live there. He just was there during this, and the devotees had to bring the offerings and the plates for the deities. They couldn't do it back over here. They didn't have any deity thing. It was just the way they had to come down that same stairway. And one time, a devotee came down, and I was standing at the bottom of the thing, and I think I announced that Prabhupada was coming, because it was Rath Yatra time, and I was kind of in charge of organizing it. And I said, Srila Prabhupada's coming down now, and he started to come, and this devotee hurried to get down before Prabhupada. He was carrying the deities things, and he dropped it right there in front of Prabhupada. And he looked up at Prabhupada and he said, Krishna's mercy, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked right down and he said, no, that was your stupidity. So if Krishna is doing everything in that way, in that sense, then we can just think everything is Krishna's mercy, and we're free as no. That's what surrender means. And that was what was being told all through the purports. The spiritual master tries to direct you to Krishna, and then you're supposed to direct the person that you meet to Krishna and to the spiritual master. That's the way it works. And your heart won't stop throbbing. Yes, so fine, you got it together. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one thought. That I thought it was a nice point that was being made. How, well, the intelligence is somewhat of through the intelligence we can ascertain spiritual truth just by observing, analyze, expert analysis, Krishna said. but then in the purports, it was also kind of made clear that that does not mean that we do not need a spiritual master. And I like the point that if one actually analyzes the material world and sees that, oh, this place is not where I can find happiness, then one would actually, if one actually does that successfully, one would take shelter of a spiritual master. One would take shelter of the association of devotees, because that's not on the material platform, it's on the spiritual platform. And I was relating that to kind of like the, I guess it's the Mayavad kind of thought that, God's everywhere, so you don't need to go to the temple. But if God's everywhere, then why not go to the temple? So I thought that was nicely put in the purpose.
Nicely put, Pranahari, nicely put. Because if you use your own human intelligence properly, and you go through that process of analysis, you will come to Krishna, and you will want to be with the pure devotees. Because Krishna is in the heart, and that's the whole point. I was, that little analysis from that purport, when we get up in the morning, how do we know what to do? We're in deep sleep, and we get up, we open our eyes, and oh my God, isn't it? When I used to travel like a lot, like every 3 days for 10, 12 years, we were in a different place. Sometimes I'd wake up and I'd try to figure out where I was, which way is the bathroom, where's the door, where am I? And by doing that, gradually I understood that I needed somebody to help me figure that out. So if we use that human intelligence like that, like you're saying, and going through that meditation that we go through when we reach the human form of Atato Brahma Jigyasa, that's what beginning of the Vedas is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So Atato means now. Atato means now. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now it's time to inquire about the absolute truth. So it means now that you have the human form of life, because only a human being can open the book up and see that and read it and know what it means. So Krishna is there at every stage, even when we get up in the morning, just to know what to do, remember who we are, and what our duties are. But to speak of when we are seeing that these things we were talking about in meditation, and gradually that it must be the spiritual intelligence then comes. When you start to do that, Krishna likes it. Majtata madgata prana bodhyanta parasparam katyantas jamam nityam tushantisha ramantija. When you start getting pleasure, your real pleasure comes from discussing like this with other devotees about Krishna and glorifying him and being amazed at how he's doing all this. And you're feeling like surrendering, feeling like being a servant. Then he's pleased, and that reciprocation between him, who's inside of you, gives you strength and intelligence and the ability. That's what Prabhupada meant when he said the order, the empowerment to effect the order is in the order of itself, if it's coming from the spiritual plane. Yes, Pranav.
Yeah, I have one more.
Keep going. You're doing great.
I think that there was a nice purport that talked about, it was, throughout the purport it was proving how Krishna is actually the one that we should take shelter of. Yes. And I thought that was thoroughly and expertly done. How, because Krishna is not forgetful, so therefore he never becomes ungrateful, whereas if we render some service to some mortal being, even a demigod, then they might decide to be ungrateful and not reciprocate, or they may die, and then but Krishna's eternal, he never forgets, so he's never ungrateful. And then I think the next point was he's the supreme controller, so there's no danger of his being overcome or impeded by any other power. Thus his promise of protection is eternally valid. Because if you surrender to try to serve someone who's not the supreme controller, then even if they are grateful, even if they try, then someone who's stronger might just come and mess that all up.
Not maybe.
They do.
Maybe. Every time.
And then I think the last thing they said was that, this was nice. That in the material world, a great man does not have time for insignificant men. But although the Lord is the greatest person, he sits in the heart of every living entity. But he is thus he is the most merciful.
Yes.
So when we try to serve others, they just don't have time, even with the best intention. But Krishna, he's always in our heart. So.
And not only that, but if you do just a little service, he never forgets it, and he'll correct you. Whereas your so-called friends, they'll never do it. So it's actually the ultimate mercy of Krishna is when he corrects you, because no one else will. Everyone else is just trying to get out of you what they want for themselves. Therefore Krishna says, Mamekam sharanam braja, and aham tam sababam mokshe shami ma shuchaha. Stop worrying. Just if you surrender only to me, but if you surrender to this one and that one and this one and this one and that one and this one, you can't get that, there's always worry, there's always something around the corner. But Krishna is the sure thing. I liked in one of the parts where Uddhava was talking about how, he never makes a mistake. Everyone else will make a mistake. Even the spiritual master may make a mistake. He's a mortal being. But Krishna never makes a mistake. And not only that, he never has, eternally. And wherever he comes, people try to do him, try to get him, they try to do this or try to do that. But he's always victorious. What is the last verse of the Gita, the final verse? I think it's spoken by Sanjaya, isn't it? He starts it out and he finishes it. Wherever there is Krishna, yatra yogeshwara Krishno, yatra partho dhanurdara, tatra shir vijayo bhutir, dhruva nitir matir mama. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. The end of the Gita. Oh yes, we're just waiting.
I just hit some high points.
Oh boy, take us from low points to high points, please. Go ahead.
This is simple stuff.
There's no stupid stuff ever come from you.
It's like try to see Krishna in all things. Chant the holy name. That's the way to Krishna in this age. And then you can talk to God. No one can claim to be a self-made man.
Oh yeah. No one can claim to be a self-made man.
We're all dependent on Krishna. It is said that Krishna doesn't remember the faults of his devotees. Thank God. And Krishna is the personal friend of every living entity. Never feel discouraged, but rather count your blessings. An intelligent person will come to the lotus feet of Krishna. They're just I like to write those high points and read them back.
Nice, very nice.
But
and we're going to learn now how a perfect human being does that with his own intelligence. Because now we're going to hear from the Avadhuta Brahman how, he sees all the gurus talk to him. The mountains and the bees and the trees and the,
seeing Krishna in all things.
Yeah. And he comes to the right conclusion.
But I'd especially like that one, never feel discouraged, but rather count your blessings. So if you feel discouraged, then start going back and count, all the things that are good.
Yeah, Radhanath Maharaj, this is one of his favorite things. He writes it down and speaks it all the time. the cornerstone of your house of bhakti is built upon gratitude. Because without, how did we get here? How did we get this? I mean, what did we do to deserve this? To be sitting here and hearing such nectar coming from Srimad-Bhagavatam.
I liked,
Yes, Patrick, please.
I liked the part. Prana brought up part of the same paragraph. It says, it's in text 18. Uddhava describes his personal situation as nirvana di. Is it D-H-I?
Ahi.
Yeah.
Ahi. There's a dot on the end of the H. That means Dahi.
Dahi.
And if it's an A, it's aha. And if it's an I, it's ihi, Ahi.
Alright, thank you. Vrijana bitaptaha. In other words, Sri Uddhava states that he is exhausted and discouraged by the contradictions and anguish of material life. He has been forced, therefore, to become humble and surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna, the personal friend of every living entity. And I just kind of thought about that, and to surrender doesn't really mean to just release and merge. It means to actually push through all these kind of contradictions and anguish and tribulations that we go through and keep serving Krishna throughout all the trouble that we face. Just keep pushing through for Krishna.
Nice. Thank you. Yes, Matthew.
Hi, I had a question about this part of the purport from verse 20 that we read. It says, by observing the happiness and distress of other living entities, one can understand what is beneficial and what is destructive. It got me thinking about something that I read that senses of a fool that's trying to have sense gratification makes one a fool.
Well, that's part of it, sure.
I was just wondering about how we can apply that a person just appreciating a devotee makes progress. Like, what's the line to not gratify their senses?
There's a verse. Oh my God, you remember? There's a verse. I don't remember where it is. I wish your spiritual master was here. He would know for sure. But it talks about how devotional service is so auspicious. Cut it out. See, whenever you're about to say something good, Maya tries to stop us because that's her business. There's a verse that talks about how even observing another and appreciating another person's service, another person doing service. We experienced this. I already told you about it when we were in the airport, and these businessmen would sometimes watch us, and they couldn't believe that we're meeting people we had never met before and giving them all these books. And we would sometimes do 100 books, or I was doing regular 60, 80 books every day, and they were just amazed. So I was going to read this. There's a verse that says that they were appreciating. Enough already. Enough already. What would we do without it? Right? Maya's so merciful. What would we do without it? Because it makes her remember more strongly. It's something. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashiti yorjana sukham va yadiva dukam sayugi paramomata. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and in their distress. So if you know, you see, you know what distress is, what causes you distress, and you look out and you can see the distress of others, and you can see that qualitatively you're the same. And if you see someone who's in ecstatic Krishna consciousness and you appreciate that, then you get spiritual benefit and head in. And when that turns into the hankering to be like that person, rather than go over that person, or be better than that person, or whatever, then you go forward towards perfection. Is that something?
Excellent.
Does that make sense? I can't remember the verse, darn it. I'll try to look it up. There's an actual verse that says that if you look at another person doing devotional service and you appreciate it, then you make advancement that way. Do you find it?
I have some verses, yeah. It's in the, there's a few different ones, but one's in the Uddhava Gita, actually.
Yes, 11th Canto.
This one says, I don't know if this is actually the one. It says, whoever indulges in praising or criticizing the qualities and behavior of others will quickly become deviated from his own best interest by his entanglement in illusory dualities. That's not the one we're looking for.
I'll find this out. I'll find it out and bring it, and I'll report back. It's my homework. I'll do my homework and come and bring it back tomorrow.
Isn't it kind of like being the well-wisher of everyone?
Yeah, you can't be the well-wisher of everyone.
Somebody instead
Of anybody.
Envious of
Yes,
them, you know?
yes, you can't actually be the well-wisher of others. If you're in material consciousness, then you think what will make the other person good if they become like me. If they become more like me, then they're doing good. It's the opposite.
Yeah,
But if you see that
somebody's doing good.
yeah, and you feel good about that. You feel good seeing somebody doing something good. If you see somebody doing well in Krishna consciousness, that's the consciousness that will take you to advancement in Krishna. You got it. I have faith in you. You know, you're the pundit.
Okay, this is in 10th Canto, Chapter 69, Text 45.
What's the context?
Well, hold on, maybe this isn't it. I'll read it anyways. This is the context after we heard the Krishna. It's after we heard about Narada Muni visiting Lord Krishna's palaces. I don't know if this is it, actually. I could be wrong again.
Go ahead.
Lord Hari is the ultimate cause of universal creation, maintenance, and destruction. My dear King, anyone who chants about, hears about, or simply appreciates
That's it.
the extraordinary activities he, Krishna, performed in this world will
That's
surely
not it.
develop devotion. Yeah, I don't think it's
But it's close. I mean,
it's getting closer.
yeah. That's where it goes to. That's where it ultimately goes to. But the one I'm looking for is the one who appreciates another person doing devotional service. It's there. It's there. We'll find it. It's fun to remember. It's fun to remember these things. This is a good way to do it. To pick out little phrases and then read them together and read them again. And remember like that. With the permission of the assembled sages, I will stop now. Uddhava Gita, it's just getting sweeter and sweeter, isn't it? Every day it's getting sweeter and sweeter. Those purports today were really out of this world. Out cyberspace, all of you out in cyberspace. Oh, by the way, I got a report from Mayapur Shashi, who is doing the YouTube channel. He's got 508. I don't know how he's got mystic power or something. 508 of these videos are now transferred over to not transferred over, but copied over to so if you go to YouTube and look up daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. It's the same title as the Facebook. Then you can find all the, you don't have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. They're right there in order. Bhagavatam, Gita, like that.
There's one comment. It's not really a question, I guess a little bit of a question, but...
We got something from cyberspace.
More of like a request. Melinda Eichenmiller. Hi. Been having blood pressure issues and heart issues. Been on heart meds. I'm 36, going for a stress test on heart tomorrow. Could use some prayer and guidance.
Name again?
Melinda.
Melinda.
Yes.
And what's the last name?
Eichenmiller.
This may be a relative of mine. It may be. Well, I'm going to go get my hips replaced pretty soon, and in the meantime, I can barely walk, and it hurts like hell, and it's frustrating because I can't go anywhere, do anything. But because I'm always hearing and chanting about Krishna, generally between 7 and 9 hours a day, I can perceive for myself that it doesn't touch me. And so I'm happy, really happy, despite the things that are going on to my body. So the only advice I can give you is, you're not your blood pressure, and you're not your body and your mind at all. And if you take up this remembrance of Krishna and hearing and chanting Krishna, eventually when you become expert at it, you know, of course this is 47 years later, it may take a little time, but it will come to the point where you can perceive for yourself that the pain and things that you go through don't actually touch you. And they never do, and they never did. Because you're eternal. And you're eternally happy, and you're full of knowledge. That's all I got to say. So that's my prayer, that you'll do this. Take up this process. Chant Hare Krishna when you're in the doctor's office. Chant Hare Krishna when they give you the test. And chant Hare Krishna when you come out. And we'll all chant Hare Krishna for you over here. And let's see what happens. Hare Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same station, right here in the live studios of Radha Lane. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.